So here's what will be covering today. I start by introducing our own journey in developing a Norwegian clinical language model, why we believe it's important, and what we aim to achieve with that. So currently it is a language model and not a large language model, since we did not have enough computing resources to make it as a large language model. We're aiming towards that, but we will see how that goes. And we'll then look at the foundations, what large language models are, why clinical large language models matter, and how they're being applied in healthcare today. We will also touch on the ethical considerations, especially bias in models. And after that, I'll walk you through our own research and use cases, including clinical coding, adverse drug event detection, de-identification, and our custom model NorDeClin-BERT. So finally, I will wrap up with key challenges and where we see this work going next. So our own journey to develop the first clinical language model has been the result of 8 years of sustained effort, carried out with limited resources. We started very small, with little funding, minimal infrastructure, and a lot of uncertainty. But we had a strong belief that this was both needed and possible. So despite financial and technical constraints, we managed to create the first clinical language model in Norwegian. So this achievement underscores the value of long-term commitment. It was a cross-disciplinary collaboration and innovation under pressure. So it's a testament to what can be accomplished when purpose drives persistence. So my previous team developed the first Norwegian clinical language model, and I played a pivotal role in organizing this and driving the project to success. So this achievement marks a major milestone in advancing healthcare innovation. It made possible through strategic collaboration with a hospital in northern Norway and also Stockholm University, where we had a professor involved in our work. So the journey to reach this point was anything but straightforward. It's like the slide you see here. It was filled with obstacles and very unexpected turns. Accessing the necessary data and computing resources posed some of the biggest challenges. So, however, my team and I, we did remain persistent and we never gave up. So access to data and computing resources remains one of the biggest challenges we face. At the American Medical Informatics Association Symposium 2 years ago, this was in Florida. No, this was in San Francisco then. The University of Florida presented a study that was run on a GPU data park valued at $70 million US. So we were sitting there and my colleagues were presenting. I couldn't help but think of our own setup. One single computer costing $10,000. That takes 3 months to complete just one job. And you see on the screen here that the small computer, it has 2 GPU. It's the image to the left. So it clearly illustrates the contrast of our modest data park compared to the state-of-the-art infrastructure at the University of Florida. So this stark contrast isn't just about hardware, it reflects deeper systemic issues in how power is distributed in the AI ecosystem. So it's a microcosm of a broader reality. Those with access to the best tools are shaping the future, while others risk being left behind. So those who control data and computing power are the dominant players in AI. So tech giants like Microsoft and Google, they are investing heavily to secure access to both. So GPU farms and waste data sets are becoming the new competitive edge. And like Isaac Cohen from Harvard University put it, in the healthcare sector, we lack the personnel, the strategy, and the vision. So this kind of makes it clear if we want to participate meaningfully in AI development, especially in healthcare, we must rethink our investments and strategic priorities. So while global large language models like GPT-4 are impressive, they don't fully meet the needs of Norwegian healthcare system. First, there's the language barrier. Norwegian clinical language includes unique terminology, the abbreviations and syntax that general models simply don't handle well. So we need a model that understands how clinicians in Norway actually speak and document care. And secondly, our population health profile is different. Disease prevalence, treatment patterns, and clinical guidelines, they vary. A model trained on Norwegian data is better suited to reflect local practice and improve decision-making accuracy. And thirdly, we operate under very strict privacy laws and ethical standards, like GDPR and national health regulations. So we need models that are built with these rules in mind from the start. And finally, if we want these tools to truly improve outcomes in Norway, they need to be clinically relevant to our healthcare context, not just translated, but trained on our data, aligned with our values and trusted by our professionals. So why this work matters, large language models are kind of transforming healthcare globally, from automating clinical documentation to supporting decision-making and patient interaction. But much of this innovation is happening in English, and often with that data, that doesn't reflect our own healthcare system, or language, or our patients. In Norway, we face unique challenges. We have relatively small data sets, but good data sets. We have complex clinical language and strong requirements for privacy and ethical use. So if we want to unlock the potential of language models in our healthcare system, we need models that understand Norwegian clinical language, not just translated English. So our goal has been to develop a robust, a domain-specific language model trained on Norwegian clinical text, so it can be used to improve patient safety, support clinicians, and also accelerate research. And while respecting the values of trust, transparency, and data protection that define Norwegian healthcare. So large language models are unique in processing multimodal data, thereby improving emergency, elderly care, and digital medical procedures. Large language models are advanced deep learning models designed to generate human-like text. And they do this by predicting the next word in a sentence based on patterns learned from massive amounts of text. And what makes them powerful is their scale. Many contain hundreds of millions to billions of parameters, and their ability to process natural language with minimal human input. These models don't just mimic grammar, they understand the context, meaning, tone, and even subtle nuances in language. And this is why they become a cornerstone of natural language processing. They're used in everything from chatbots and virtual assistants to healthcare documentation and clinical decision support. It may seem like large language models have arrived out of the blue along with new developments in generative AI. However, many companies have spent years and also institutions on implementing the large language models at different levels to enhance their natural language understanding and processing capabilities. And this has occurred alongside advances in machine learning, also the machine learning models, the algorithms, the neural networks, and the transformer models that provide the architecture for these AI systems. So the figure here you see on the screen is illustrating the interplay and overlap. This figure shows how technologies like ChatGPT didn't appear in isolation. They evolved from decades of progress in AI, machine learning, and deep learning. Each layer builds on the last, with overlapping domains like natural language processing contributing directly to the development of large language models. What's powerful here is the convergence. Large language models like ChatGPT are a result of combining the deep learning's neural networks with natural language processing's linguistic focus, and resulting in models that can understand and generate language like humans. So these models have become increasingly relevant in the healthcare domain, where they can be leveraged to enhance clinical decision making. This part here gives us a visual roadmap of how the large language models have evolved over time. You see at the top, we start with foundational models like Google's BERT, the MT5 and GPT-1, which emerged around 2018. These early models laid the groundwork for more powerful and conversational systems. And as we move into 2019 and 2020, we see rapid growth with models like GPT-2 and GPT-3, which introduce a major leap in the ability to generate human-like text. Then by 2021 and 2022, the ecosystem exploded with specialized models like, for instance, Codex for code and FLAN for fine-tuned language understanding, and also the open source players like Bloom and Opt. These years also brought us powerful generalists like Lambda, Chinchilla, and Anthropic's models. In 2023 and beyond, we see even more sophisticated models like ChatGPT-4, Gemini, Claude 2, and Meta Llama 2. Each of these offering not only better performance, but multimodal capabilities. So combining text, image, voice, or even reasoning tasks. What's important here is that this isn't just about text anymore. These models are now being used in healthcare coding, personal assistant, and real-world applications. The slide shows a clear evolution from foundational transformer models to today's powerful AI engines that are beginning to transform the entire industry, including healthcare and education. So this picture here gives us a high-level view of how large language models like BERT and GPT are built and how they function. On the left side, we see the infrastructure pipeline from collecting and optimizing data to the training models and deploying them. So this is the technical foundation behind any large language model system. At the bottom left, the neural network diagram shows how these models connect inputs, like words, for instance, to output representations through layers of computation. The right side here compares two popular architectures. That is BERT, which is a bidirectional encoder, and GPT, which is an autoregressive decoder. So BERT looks at the context of a word from both directions, left to the right, which makes it ideal for understanding the meaning of the text. GPT, on the other hand, generates text by looking only at the previous context. That's why it's great for generating fluent responses. So both models use layers of something which is called self-attention, helps a word understand its relationship to other words in the sentence, and also the multi-head attention, and that runs several self-attention processes in a parallel to capture this richer context. And also the feed-forward networks, which refines each word's meaning after attention. And also the positional encoding tells the model the order of the words. And you can see those stacked blocks in each diagram. And what's powerful here is how these components work together to give the models the ability to understand, generate, and adapt language. You also see the source for the article where I have found this kind of illustration here. So it's possible for you to also to go and read that publication. So why should we use clinical language models in healthcare? First, they can help clinicians diagnose more accurately and quickly by analyzing large amounts of patient data, like electronic health records, lab results, or imaging, faster than any human could. So second, they help keep decisions grounded in the latest medical knowledge by also summarizing guidelines and pulling out relevant research without requiring hours of searching. They also improve communication with patients by powering conversational agents that can answer questions and guide people through basic medical concerns. Administratively, large language models are a huge help, reducing the burden of documentation and coding and freeing up clinicians to spend more time with patients. And finally, they're showing real promise in drug discovery and research, helping teams process complex scientific data at a speed and a scale we've never had before. But you should be aware of that the clinical large language models come with real risks. They can generate incorrect or misleading information. They can hallucinate, and they don't truly understand clinical reasoning or context. It's often unclear who's accountable when something goes wrong. They also raise concerns about data privacy, and if the training data is biased, the model can worsen health disparities. Clinicians might overtrust the output, and if the system doesn't integrate well into workflows, it can kind of cause frustration. The regulations around their use are still unclear, which makes safe deployment a challenge. And finally, these models require access to sensitive patient data. And that raises serious concern around privacy and data protection, and maybe the risk of security breaches. There are advantages, but be aware of the risks and the pitfalls. So large language models are increasingly being applied across a wide range of areas in healthcare. In drug discovery, they help accelerate research by analyzing waste chemical and biological datasets to identify promising compounds faster. In medical image, large language models, especially when paired with other AI models, can improve diagnostic accuracy by interpreting scans and flagging potential issues. And when it comes to patient care, they support personalized treatment and real-time decision support, making healthcare more responsive and tailored to individual needs. And they also handle administrative tasks, like I said previously, like documentation and coding, which I will also go into later, which boosts efficiency and reduces time spent on paperwork. In epidemiology and public health, large language models are used for early detection of trends, outbreak prediction, and modeling disease progressions across populations. And in bioinformatics, they assist with analyzing genomic and clinical data and helping researchers uncover patterns and make sense of complex biological systems. And finally, they play a vital role in the data de-identification. And that's something we also been working with. Removing or masking personal identifiers from clinical text to ensure privacy compliance under frameworks like, for instance, GDPR and HIPAA. So as you can see, large language models are just tools for writing. They're becoming deeply integrated into the full healthcare ecosystem. And I did some research. I see there is a rising number of companies that are popping up using AI methods as large language models and multimodal methods. For instance, on the top one here, the Inference, it's a company and they employs their Insights platform. It's to harness multimodal data for various applications. And they work, for instance, with drug discovery and to identify potential therapeutic targets and biomarkers. And they use a lot of the natural language processing and large language model techniques for their work. And they have a long-term partnership with healthcare centers, and they're connecting the data through federated learning network to optimize clinical data management and utilize the real-world data. So their partners are Mayo Clinic in the US, Duke Health, Banner Health, Emory Healthcare, Vanderbilt University Center. And then we have one European company, Aukin, is a French artificial intelligence and biotech company that aims to identify new treatments and optimize clinical trials and develop AI diagnostics. We did actually interview them a few years ago for our study on how to implement AI in healthcare. And since then, they have developed enormously. So the company uses federated learning, a type of privacy-preserving technology, to access multimodal patient data from academic institutions and hospitals to train their AI models for instance, drug discovery, development, and diagnostics. So Aukin has collaborated with pharmaceutical companies around the world to improve their therapeutic programs. And then we have this Nuance Stacks, who is owned by Microsoft. They have an AI solution that listens to doctor-patient conversations and automatically generates clinical notes. And then the last one is Hippocratic AI, who works with WellSpan physicians. And they have generative AI healthcare agents. So these agents comprehensively and empathically engage patients in conversation, asking and answering questions relating to, for instance, the colorectal health, and providing a complete transcript of the conversation to the partner, WellSpan clinicians for review, because that's who they work with. And in some cases, live transfer to or later follow-up by a human clinician. I found an article where Mr. Mukherjee, who is a co-founder of the company, he said that there is a potential for agentic AI in emergency relief, and especially as climate change drives now for more frequent disasters like wildfires and heat waves. So with AI agents, they can proactively reach out to every individual in affected areas and ask simple but critical questions, like whether they're running out of essential supplies. So that kind of outreach could be life-saving, especially for people with chronic health conditions. And there are also clear benefits for equality inclusion. So AI agents that speak multiple language can help bridge equity gaps. In fact, when they say that, in fact, when a Spanish-speaking agent contacts a Spanish-speaking customer, the engagement rate doubled. So people respond when they feel seen and heard and spoken in their own dialect. And that would be wonderful to have in Norwegian as well, and in Sami, which is kind of my mother language. And here you see the picture. That's actually me when I was very young, and I have my Sami dress on me. So as we integrate large language models into healthcare, we must be mindful of several ethical and societal challenges. First, we need to ensure the empirical reliability. The models must produce consistently accurate and clinically sound outputs. Just as important is the issue of privacy. So since large language models often process sensitive health information, we must design systems that rigorously protect patient confidentiality. There's also the challenge of bias. If trained on unbalanced data, large language models risk reinforcing existing health disparities. That's why it's essential to develop human-centric, transparent, and bias-aware models, particularly for use in personalized medicine. So ultimately, the promise of large language models in healthcare is transformative, but to realize the potential responsibility, we must prioritize accountability, also the equitable access, and also the ethical development from the start. And as we deploy large language models in healthcare, we must confront their ethical limitations, particularly around bias and equity. There is a growing consensus that we need human-centric and unbiased large language models to support the personalized medicine and to ensure that development and access are fair and inclusive for all individuals. So let me give you a concrete example here. A study from 2024 published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research, they reported that Google Board demonstrated racial bias in diagnostic outputs, disproportionately affecting minority patients. And this illustrates how large language models, if unchecked, can unintentionally reinforce health disparities. And the same journal emphasized that there are significant risks if these systems are not thoroughly evaluated and monitored for bias and performance. And a study from Stanford School of Medicine, they raised serious concerns about how commercial large language models may perpetuate racist, outdated medical ideas, so potentially worsening health disparities, especially for patients. The researchers tested 4 leading models, like, for instance, ChatGPT, GPT-4, which is OpenAI, Google Bard, and Anthropic Claude. When asked medical questions about kidney function, lung capacity, and pain tolerance, all 4 models produced harmful racial biased responses. So the large language models often promoted discredited medical practices, like using race in formulas for kidney function or lung capacity, even though this practice has been proven scientifically invalid. Repeated false biological claims, such as suggesting African American people have thicker skin or feel less pain, myths that how long contributed to misdiagnosis and unequal treatment, and justifies race-based medicine by invoking outdated beliefs like more muscle mass in African American patients. A debunked rationale that once influenced care protocols. So mixed incorrect information, for instance, saying race is a social construct in one answer, but citing genetic differences in another. And in some cases, the models even invented race-based formulas that don't exist, adding further confusion and bias. And you see the reference here on the screen where you also can read this article. So these findings highlight a major flaw. So large language models are trained on large unsupervised internet and textbook data sets, which means they can absorb bias or low quality information. And because their training processes aren't transparent, it's often unclear why they behave inconsistently, especially on topics related to race, gender, or culture. So this underscores an urgent need for transparent, accountable, and inclusive AI development in healthcare, because the risk of bias aren't theoretical. They directly impact real people and can reinforce harmful disparities in care. So expose the bad algorithms and create better ones. Many algorithms will need to be rebuilt from the ground up. And that's something Syed Obermeier at Berkeley said when I was one of the American Medical Information Association symposiums a few years ago. And I totally agree with him. So the question is, do the benefits of using AI in healthcare outweigh the risks? It's key to medical ethics and health informatics. AI can improve diagnosis, personalize treatment, and increase efficiency. But risks include incorrect medical advice, data security issues, and unclear responsibility for AI-driven decisions. So balancing these factors is essential to ensure ethical and sustainable use of AI in healthcare. Now that we looked at the broader landscape of AI in healthcare, let's turn to a concrete example from our own work at Norwegian Center for eHealth Research. So one of our projects called CleanCode is a great illustration of how AI can be used to solve real clinical challenges. So this slide presents the CleanCode project, which introduces an AI-supported tool called EasyICD to improve the quality of clinical coding. ICD-10 coding is complex. There are over 30,000 codes, and studies show an error rate up to 20 to 30%. EasyICD is designed to help with that. It's trained using machine learning, deep learning, and natural language processing based on data from electronic health records, lab results, and medication lists. The tool works by suggesting ICD-10 codes directly from discharge summaries. It highlights the most relevant words in the text. You can see it here, and explains, but it's in Norwegian or Swedish, and explains why specific codes were recommended. And it's using color coding to make this transparent for the clinician. So in short, the CleanCode project aims to make coding more accurate and explainable and efficient while supporting clinicians. And yes. So on this slide, we show the results from our study on using language models to support ICD-10 clinical coding. Our model NorDeClin-BERT, it outperforms other models like the NorDeClin-BERT and NorBERT when it comes to predicting diagnosis codes, especially when we look at the most frequent used ones, the top 80%. In our crossover randomized controlled trial, we tested an AI tool developed by our experts. That's the EasyICD I showed earlier on clinical coders in both Norway and Sweden. And participants switched between coding complex and simple clinical texts with and without the tool. So figure 1 shows the coding time. When coders use the AI tool on complex clinical texts, the median time dropped by 123 seconds, 46% reduction. This difference was statistically significant. For simple text, the tool didn't make a noticeable difference in speed. So figure 2 compares the model performance. So you can see that NorDeClin-BERT consistently ranks at the top, but in multi-label classification and in prediction, the top 5 most likely ICD-10 codes. So this study shows that AI and language models in particular can significantly improve efficiency in real-world clinical workflows, especially for more complex cases. While the improvement in accuracy wasn't statistically significant, the time savings alone are promising, and we see a strong case for further testing in live hospital settings. We are also working on to improve adverse drug event detection in Norwegian clinical texts. The challenge here is that many clinical natural language process models are trained in English, but we're working with Norwegian data, which is kind of limited. To overcome this, we use data augmentation by translating and expanding the training corpus using a model called NorT5. That's a Norwegian-specific version of the Transformer 5 architecture. Once we have this enriched dataset, we fine-tune NorBERT, which is a BERT model pre-trained on Norwegian, to better detect adverse drug events in clinical text. As a result, our fine-tuned NorBERT achieved 95% accuracy on the translated adverse drug event version corpus, which is a significant step forward. This work is also part of a broader initiative called Federated Health, where we explore multilingual electronic health records in a federated and privacy-preserving manner. And this allows models to learn across hospitals or countries without sharing sensitive patient data directly. So this project is just not about accuracy, it's also about ethics, privacy, and making clinical AI useful for languages like Norwegian. And the project we have has partners from Estonia, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, and it's financed by the Nordic Innovation. This slide summarizes our work on de-identifying Norwegian clinical text using a combination of state-of-the-art language models and regular expressions. We used a tool called NorDeClin, powered by NorDeClin-BERT language model, which is trained on Scandinavian languages. It was further fine-tuned and extended with regular expressions to detect sensitive information, like protected health information in real clinical notes. The aim was to accurately identify and pseudonymize personal data, such as, for instance, names, dates, the locations, healthcare units, and phone numbers, while preserving the medical content needed for research. Here on the table, you can see precision, recall, and the F1 score for each protected health information category. And the model performs well on elements like full date, phone number, and first name, but struggles with more complex or rare classes like, for instance, social security number and organization, where results are still 0. So overall, we reached a weight F1 score of 0.53, showing promising but not perfect performance. This highlights both the potential and the limitations of applying language models to the identification in a Norwegian healthcare context. These slides introduce the NorDeClin-BERT, a Norwegian clinical language model developed to support the ICD-10 diagnosis coding I've been talking about now. And it was continuously pre-trained on the ClinCode gastro corpus we worked with, which includes 8.8 million de-identified clinical notes from University Hospital of North Norway. And it's impressive 3.2 gigabyte of clinical data. The model is based on NorBERT 3 base with 12 transformer layers, 768 hidden units, and 123 million parameters. Training took place on a secure offline server using an RTX 3090 GPU. We had to think about the safety, so we had to have it offline. So after pre-training, the model was fine-tuned specifically for ICD-10 coding, particularly for gastrointestinal conditions. It outperformed the general purpose Norwegian models and even matched the performance of the much larger NorBERT 3 large model. So this shows how domain-specific training on real clinical text gives NorDeClin-BERT a strong edge in accuracy and efficiency. Here we see the training pipeline for the NorDeClin-BERT. At the top, you see the use of NorBERT 3 base and NorBERT 3 large as the starting points. These models were pre-trained on general Norwegian language. Then in the middle, we added continuous pre-training using de-identified Norwegian clinical text from the ClinCode gastro corpus. Finally, on the right, the models were fine-tuned for ICD-10 classification using 87,938 discharge summaries coded with gastrointestinal ICD-10 labels. This two-step process, first adapting the model to the clinical domain, then fine-tuning it on a specific coding task, is what enables NorDeClin-BERT to understand Norwegian medical text so effectively and outperform other models in this use case. This slide highlights the main challenges we face when developing clinical language models specifically for Norwegian healthcare data. First, we have the issue of data availability. There was a lot of work to get hold on data. There are very few annotated Norwegian clinical data sets, which makes it difficult to train models that are both accurate and domain specific. And second, there's a lack of specialized knowledge and generalizability. Even when we do have models, they may not fully capture the depth of clinical reasoning or adapt well to different patient populations or specialties. Third, are privacy and security concerns. Because we're dealing with sensitive patient data, robust de-identification and secure data handling are absolutely essential to ensure compliance and patient trust. And finally, we have to watch out for algorithmic bias. AI models can reflect or even amplify bias in the training data, leading to unequal or unsafe treatment recommendations, especially for underrepresented groups. Together, these challenges underscore the need for cautious, ethical, and context-aware development of language models in healthcare. This slide shows our vision for building a multimodal generative AI system that can support several high-impact use cases in healthcare. At the core, we're working with generative AI and large language models, but the key innovation is to build a single model that integrates different data types and capabilities. We want this model to support automation of clinical processes like ICD-10 coding and adverse drug event detection, synthetic data generation, which can help us develop and test systems without compromising real patient data, and knowledge summarization and generation, where the model can gather insights from clinical data and scientific literature, policies and more to improve decisions and outcomes. We also include federated machine learning and privacy-preserving techniques, ensuring the model can be trained across distributed sources without exposing sensitive patient data. It enables model training on decentralized data sources, enhancing privacy by keeping data localized. So rather than building many separate models for different tasks, we aim to create one powerful, secure, and flexible multimodal model that can serve multiple healthcare use cases. On the left, you see what we already built: domain-specific models, secure data pipelines, or de-identification and privacy-aware AI frameworks. And on the right, we outline our possible next steps, building intelligent assistants using an open source, as for instance, LlamaMed, designed to interact with clinicians, explain decisions, and bring in multimodal inputs like EKG or lab data. LlamaMed is a multimodal large language model designed to understand both text and images in a clinical context. It builds on Lava Large Language and Vision Assistant and is adapted for medical tasks, like interpreting EKG graphs, X-rays, or structured health data alongside clinical notes. These tools can help clinicians select ICD-10 codes more intuitively, offer real-time support with medication decisions, and explain their predictions, known as explainable AI. So most importantly, we can combine our existing structured models like EC-ICD with these new large language models to support richer dialogue-based tools that also incorporate multimodal data like EKG, lab values, or clinical text. We in Norway can actually not add GPT-4 to this because of legal requirements. Technically will be possible, but not legal. But we can add LlamaMed and other open source models. I will just walk through another project we are currently working on, which is a machine learning project. It's focused on heart rate variability in patients with thyroid disease. And the goal is to use non-invasive sensor data like electrocardiogram, activity level, sleep patterns, body temperature, and breathing rate to support thyroid hormone therapy. And we aim to do two things with it: predict the optimal dosage of thyroid replacement hormones for each patient and provide an objective measure of whether the treatment is working effectively. And this slide shows our pipeline for analyzing the EKG data using machine learning to better understand the heart rate variability here. So we start with raw EKG signal, which is often noisy and complex. The signal first goes through a pre-processing phase to clean and standardize it. And then we look at the performed feature extraction, which can be the p-peaks and the other variables here. So how can we then apply AI to detect and better understand an abnormally slow heart rate? Let's start with what we already have in place. And you see that on the left side. That's what I've been going through here. But it's possible to take this knowledge further to another project and kind of introduce the large multimodal models into the mix and call it a new project on laughing. So that's a possibility to do in the future. And that's something I came up, we haven't written any protocol for this, but this was something when I was working on the presentation that we started to look in, and we actually started to write application yesterday, which goes in that direction too. So coming to an end here. So like Demis Hassabis, CEO of Google DeepMind, is boldly predicting a future where AI eradicates all diseases within the next decade. So his pioneering work with AlphaFold, which is revolutionized protein structure prediction, is already accelerating treatments for cancer, malaria, and COVID-19. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. With AI design drugs on the horizon, Hassabis believes we could soon see therapies created in mere weeks, transforming the speed of medical breakthroughs. The true game changer, artificial general intelligence, which Hassabis predicts will soon possess the power to solve complex medical problems overnight. So it remains for us to see if AI can be end of the diseases. This development is going really fast, and it's really interesting to be part of this and following what's going on. So a short summary: Norwegian clinical language models are advancing AI-driven healthcare solutions, and continued research and industry partnerships will be essential to overcoming challenges and unlock the full potential of AI in clinical applications. And thank you for your attention.